All right, so there was an announcement. That's where we want to start.
Yeah. So October Conference 2018 was when they announced the Feather River Temple. And of course, President Nelson didn't announce it as the Feather River Temple. He just named the location, which was Yuba City, California. And I believe it was one of the times when he listed temple announcements, like at the very end of conference, because he's done it at least two different ways, probably more different ways. But that conference, he gave the final talk and he announced the temples at the end of the talk. And and it was strange because Trevor called me up and he said, "Mom, did you hear it?" And he had called me immediately, and there was a little bit of a delay. I think we were watching it through BYU TV or something, maybe YouTube. And I'm like, "No, no, 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 don't tell me, don't tell me." And so he's on the phone, and then he lists the temples, and he said Yuba City, California, and I just couldn't believe, not that it was about 20% that we would get a temple, and about another temple in our area because we have Sacramento, and about 80% Yuba City, Yuba City. And I talked to people after that, and the people right here in my town were very shocked it was Yuba City. The only people that weren't shocked it was Yuba City were the people in Yuba City Steak.
Yeah.
The people in Yuba City Steak were just ecstatic, but they were not shocked. And and then I thought about it afterwards, like, why is this such a surprise? And we have the Sacramento Temple to the south, and we have the Medford Temple in Southern Oregon to the north. And Chico was kind of the midpoint. And so I just always figured the next temple will be in Chico, and probably going to be 10 years or so, but it'll be in Chico. And I think most people assume that there's a strong stake there and good sized town. And um, anyway, so they announced Yuba City. And so immediately people that had my reaction are like, okay, why Yuba City? So then we're looking for reasons. Um, so that was October 7th of 2018. I was already in state communication. I'd been in state communication for a couple of years. And so I wanted really badly to start a Facebook page for the temple, but I thought to myself, we'll wait until the rendering and the location are released, because there was no image to use as the profile picture. And, there was no content yet to really start a page. And so I thought, okay, we'll wait. And And then, okay, that was October 7th, 2018. A month later, November 8th, 2018, was the campfire in Paradise, California, which is Chico Steak.
Oh, I forgot that they were that close. So
Yeah, they were only a month apart.
that's right. Yeah. Okay. I forgot about that.
And we were consumed in that because we're only like 30 minutes away. So we were consumed by the recovery effort, not like Chico was, but our town, we had the Red Cross shelter. We eventually had we called it the FEMA village, but it was a property where they had 300 mobile home units for survivors. And um, we had several like, well, like places where people could bring donations, and then survivors could come and get what they needed, food, clothing, and so on. So anyway, we were really involved as we started to go through that experience. We were hearing about Paradise saints who left the area, who not just left Paradise, which they were forced to do, but they left the area. Like, some of them went to Chico for a while, then they left the area. Some of them went to Yuba City and then left the area. I know one older couple who packed their car and drove to their daughters in Oregon and never came back.
Yeah.
And so there was this diaspora, right, of all the campfire survivors across the nation and probably internationally. But that happened to the Saints too. And they lost when they eventually got back up there. They dissolved one of the Paradise wards. They had 2 wards. Now they just have 1. And it affected the Chico stake. You know, they didn't just lose their Paradise members, they lost a few Chico people too, because there was such an impact on Chico that there are a few members that left Chico.
Yeah.
And so I thought, and the stake president, I mean, the stake president there in Chico was relatively new. And one of the things that he really hoped would happen someday is a temple in Paradise. Like he thought that would be a beautiful setting. The name of the town, you know, kind of works with the temple location.
Yeah.
And instead, he gets the campfire, an announcement in Yuba City, and a campfire. And so I thought, okay, the Lord knew the campfire was coming. Maybe that's why Chico didn't get it. And then President Nelson came to Chico to comfort the saints. And that was a whole experience. You know, he had just lost a daughter to cancer. And I mean, he was actually between her death and her funeral. He came anyway. And he told that story about losing her when he spoke to the saints in the Chico Stake Center. Anyway,
He spoke to the Paradise members specifically, right? It was like invitation only.
I don't know. Could have been. And maybe they streamed it to other buildings for people that weren't from Paradise. I never heard that, so I don't know, but it's likely.
Maybe it was maybe there was a different session. Maybe there's multiple sessions for different. But I remember hearing that. I remember hearing that there was the chapel, and they asked the members of the church who were from Paradise to be in the chapel, and it was a full chapel. Like they were packed. And President Nelson addressed them.
And so Josh and Robin Cook, so my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, who lived and still live in Chico. They were involved in communication, and they really mobilized when they found out President Nelson was coming. And they got community leaders to come, and they pulled in some of the Sikh community leaders from Yuba City. And so there were, and I think Carm Baines was there. You know, I'm not sure about that. I know there was a Sikh community leader. I think it was Carm Baines.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
And he sat right on the front row, and they did a meet and greet beforehand. So President Nelson was meeting community leaders, and if it was Carm Baines, Carm gave him that golden yellow scarf. Mm-hmm. And so if you Google that in the church news, there's pictures everywhere of that. And so anyway,
that effort was specifically to welcome the temple, right? Like they were there to represent the town of the temple. It didn't have anything to do with the fire, right?
Yeah. So I think the Yuba City mayor was there. Vasquez, something like that. So yeah, because President Nelson was coming to Chico, they got some Yuba City community leaders, civic leaders, to drive up and be there for that. So it was all very well orchestrated. And President Nelson had this very touching exchange with Carm Baines. I'm just going to say it's Carm. I'm like 99% sure it was Carm. And then he sat on the front row. And during President Nelson's talk, he looked right down at Carm, and Carm was very visible because he had the headpiece on. And he said, "Now I see why the Lord wants a temple in Yuba City." Now think about that. He's in Chico trying to comfort Chico State saints. And he looks down at Carm and says, "Now I understand why the Lord wants a temple in Yuba City,"
Yeah.
which is kind of amazing. Um,
Well,
but that really played out. That whole dynamic with the Sikh community really played out.
yeah, so we'll talk about it later, but the quick context behind that is that generally speaking, you don't get other religions that are excited about an LDS temple coming into the area. And the Sikh community is huge in Yuba City, and they were thrilled to have an LDS temple. I don't know how many of them came to the open house, and they celebrated the fact that it was like an old traditional Sikh family property that the temple was built on, and like it was it was nuts. So it makes sense that the prophet or really anybody would come into a situation like that and be like, "Oh, this is different. We don't normally get this kind of response."
Yeah. Oh, and one thing, let me go back and pick it up, is that immediately after the announcement on October 7th, like before the day ended, I think Josh had contacted the mayor, and the mayor had released a letter of congratulations and support.
Saying,
Um,
said something to the effect of, "We will do everything we can to make this happen as fast and smoothly as possible." Something like that. Like we're not here to.
yeah. And so, yeah, and that was one of the truly extraordinary things about a temple in Yuba City, was the community support. And we saw it from the very beginning, from the day of the announcement, clear through the dedication. It was truly amazing. Let's see, anything more to say about
So the whole,
that trip?
yeah, that whole experience and all the pieces to it were just kind of a way of answering the floating question of the region, which is why not Chico, right? Like that was that was an attempt to try and explain to ourselves why not Chico, and in the end, we're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is starting to make sense.
Yeah. And one of the first thoughts I had, like after that happened, I thought to myself, maybe there will be a lot of Sikhs, like eventually over the years, there will be a lot of Sikhs that come into the church in the Yuba City area.
I gotta send you.
And I don't think we've seen that. What's that?
I gotta send you a podcast that I just listened to this podcast um, that talked about that, and it was super cool.
And maybe that'll happen. I'm sure it'll happen, right? I mean, it's like all kinds of people will come into the gospel, but at least to this point, we haven't seen it yet. But by the time of the dedication, there was one Sikh young man that had come into the temple, or come into the church. Um, but the support from the Sikh community was just off the charts. I mean, from so many different groups, but the Sikhs, it was just staggering. You know, we could probably do a recording session just on that.
Yeah,
Okay, let me move on.
we could probably get help doing it because I don't know the specifics, but the high councilman in my ward he told me that because we're doing a bunch of Spanish stuff in our ward. And he's like, yeah, it's great. We're learning a lot. We're going to apply it. The problem is in our area, it's not Spanish. Like we have a lot of people who are coming in that are speaking other languages, and we don't even know what language they're speaking. Like we don't know if it's like a Hindi, Sikh, like Pakistani. Like we have no idea. So we're trying to figure this out because there's quite a few of them, and we're having a tough time. So they're facing it. I don't think it's like in droves, but they've got people, a few people.
Yeah, make a note of that, Denton, about doing a recording session just about the Sikhs. Um, and make a note about possibly doing a session with Lynn Takahashi. out of the Yuba City steak. Okay, so that happens with President Nelson, and then everything goes pretty quiet, and we're just waiting for a location and rendering to be released. And it became pretty apparent because of city council agendas and minutes that the church was trying to get approval for the temple at the site of the stake center. And so that was no big surprise, right? Because people were posting like screenshots of the agenda, and it's public information, so it's available for everybody. And so we were waiting, and then Josh called me. So Josh, during all of this, was and still is coordinating council communication director. So a coordinating council is the same boundaries as a mission. So it was the Roseville Mission, Roseville Coordinating Council, and he was a communication director. So he was CCCD. And I told him, I said, I would like to start a Facebook page when the rendering gets released. Is that going to be okay? Because I wasn't a private citizen. I was in state communications. So there needed to be some line of authority, somebody saying, yeah, it's good. And he called me a couple of days before the rendering was released, and he said, the rendering's going to be released. I said, can I do a Facebook page? And he said, yeah, go ahead. And I don't know if he never asked anybody, but I think it was kind of on a whim, shooting from the hip, that he said, yeah, just do it. And so that morning I was ready. And as soon as they released the rendering, I had my picture, right? And I started the page. And I didn't start an Instagram account because I wasn't familiar with Instagram. But I did start it later. I started a companion Instagram account. So,
Dave
Ross, I need you to do Dave.
Dave must have
That
heard,
might be asleep.
Dave must have heard Cooper. All right, so you started the Facebook page maybe against proper etiquette, and then you started Instagram.
Yeah, and later on, I would learn that the church has a difficult relationship with temple social media accounts that people create, even if they're in state communication. Like I think the lack of control is problematic for them. But anyway, that was kind of the beginning. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say about the rendering and the location. Just that there was a lot of community support.
Yeah, everybody was
obviously because they approved it, right?
yeah, everybody was pretty excited. And the whole like we need to keep it a secret until it's announced, but it got leaked through the city council. Like, in my opinion, that's the way it should be. It should be like every week there's an update from headquarters. This is what we're thinking. We got 5 properties. We're trying to narrow it down to 2 by the end of the week. We're talking to these people. Like I mean, I'm not an expert in that area, so it wouldn't surprise me if somebody was like, no, you shouldn't do that because like people will gang up on them and they'll like graffiti their house to try and persuade them to say yes or no to whatever thing that they want. So it doesn't surprise me that that would be a bad idea. But as far as the community and like Yuba City, that experience, it seems like that would have made sense just because everybody was so excited and we were all waiting and there wasn't really that resistance. And then recently there's been cases that have had huge resistance. So maybe that approach is a standard for all locations, regardless of whether or not they're support or not. But I think people were excited about the rendering, the look. The location is actually really cool because it's pretty centralized and you can see it, not super well, but you can see it from a few different places on the highways and freeways. And there's a pretty good main drag that goes right in front of it. So if you're on that main drag, which gets a few thousand cars a day, it's like comes out of nowhere and you're like, holy smokes. And then kind of tucked behind it is the big brand new city courthouse, right? And so those are like competing motifs, right? You've got and they don't face each other and they don't really compete with each other in that way or anything like that. There's trees that block the view, so you can't really see one from the other. But if you think about it, you really have a contrast across the street where the buildings look completely different, they serve a completely different purpose, and it's kind of a cool contrast like that. Um, the other thing that's interesting about that location is that the Sikh community, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the Sikh community has a huge parade once a year, just happened, whatever the November date or something like that. And and this parade is big enough that basically the whole town shuts down, or at least that half of town shuts down because it
Yeah.
takes up every major road in the city and it goes basically all day. And there's signs up all over town along the sidewalks and everything saying, beware on this day, there's going to be a parade. And so you need to be far away from this area. And there's hundreds of signs. There's hundreds of signs all over town saying like, this is the street you avoid in 3 weeks. Okay, just remember 3 weeks from now that you don't want to be anywhere near here. And if you are in that area, it's impressive how many people are there and how great it is. It's a wonderful celebration, right? But there's just so many people, and if you're not expecting it, it completely ruins your day. So they've got to, announce it. Anyway, they have this parade. The parade goes right in front of the temple. So everybody in the
And
parade,
actually turns the corner. It
yeah,
turns the corner right there.
yeah, it
Yeah,
corners
like
the
it
temple.
comes in front of it goes Butte House Road and then Civic Center Drive. It goes because we caught it one time going to something like you were getting set apart as Elderstorm president or something, and we caught it. Yeah, it was everything we could do to get into the Stake Center parking lot.
Yeah. So the and the Sikh community and the parade and everything loves it. Like they are excited to have that giant temple on their parade route. And they're like, "Yeah, temple." And it's not the only thing they're excited about on the parade route, but it's one of the things that they like. So that's pretty cool.
And let me just say too, I have to give some credit, lots of credit to the Yuba City State Communication Committee. I mean, when I asked Josh, I said, why do you think Yuba City? And he didn't hesitate at all. He said their state communication people down there have just been knocking it out of the park for a while now, and they have completely prepared that area to accept and support a temple.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard
So
stories more recently where I understand that better now because like I've tried to do that in my community and it hasn't worked very well. And so I've gone to some of these Yuba City guys and I'm like, what are you doing that's different than what I'm doing? And they'll describe it to me and I'm just blown away like you talk to those churches like that? Like I can't even have that conversation with these guys. It wouldn't pass. So it's pretty impressive. I mean, one of them was bragging because he's like, "Yeah, we have a great relationship. In fact, one time, the pastor of that one church over there, he couldn't do his message that day. He got sick or something, so he asked me to do it. And so I gave the sermon in his church that one Sunday, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that would never fly with these guys.
yeah, I mean it's an unusual town, right? They have several temples. I mean, one of the posts we did on Facebook was about all the temples in the Yuba Sutter area. And they're, first of all, Sikhs build a lot of temples. Like you can build a temple for your family. And
Mm.
so yeah, there's the two main temples, but there are, I remember Googling it, and there's like a dozen temples in the Yuba Sutter area. Then you have the Chinese temple, the Hindu temple. Um,
Yeah.
I'm missing one of them. Anyway, several temples, and you have the Islamic Center just down the road from the big Sikh temple, and so it's a very richly interfaith supportive community.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it just became more and more apparent over time, like it was apparent to President Nelson why Yuba City.
And
But
to
I tell you, it wasn't long. I think when they released the rendering is when they announced the new name, the Feather River Temple. And and nobody balked at that. And I think because Yuba City is just kind of a strange name. Um, it just doesn't flow. And I remember looking one time, and there's no other temple in California that isn't named after the town it's in or the main town. Like the Sacramento Temple is actually in Rancho Cordova, but you know, it's named the Sacramento Temple. And so Feather River, so Feather River, I mean, the Feather River comes out at Oroville, right? And flows through the Big Scriddly area and down through the Live Oak area and into Marysville and Yuba City. So it's kind of this inclusive name, like Feather River. And plus it's a beautiful name, Feather River. It just sounds beautiful.
yeah.
So I was glad that they chose a good name. I mean, the other problem with Yuba City is that people from out of the area, you find them saying Yuba, like we're going to go to Yuba.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, no, no, you have to say city. It's like Park City. You can't say we're going to go up to Park. No, it doesn't work. It's Yuba City.
Yeah, I wonder about the changing of the name and if that was to kind of also not be too presumptuous about the other temples in Yuba City, right? Like none of the other temples
Oh, yeah.
in the city temple, they're all called like the Sikh temple. And so us calling it like this is the Yuba City temple is this one. So I was like, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense just on that case. But the other thing that's interesting that I think would surprise
That's
people,
a good thought.
the other thing that would surprise people is that the Yuba City area is uniquely set up with its interfaith communities. So if there's Yuba City and then around it are kind of dotted like the Marysville and then the Live Oak, and you could even include Natomas, I guess, as kind of a neighbor. And then kind of up on the hills, the Calusa side. And then you go to Gridley and Chico. Nobody in that area that I'm aware of has anything even closely similar to the kind of interfaith overlap and community that Yuba City does. Like there's a huge Sikh community, and you don't find a bunch of Sikhs like populating these other towns. Like for whatever, I'm not sure the background or why that happened like that exactly, but they have congregated densely in Yuba City, and so the vibe there has always been unique. Like growing up, we always knew that if you went to Yuba City, you were going to see the Sikh people and you're going to be around them and the foods and the restaurants. And you'd see the truck, they drive different vehicles. They drive the trucks with a different style and the cars with a different style. And you didn't see that if you drove the other direction. It was a very unique culture there.
I think that's a great point. It is uniquely diverse in its faith communities. In
Because
other ways too, but in its faith communities, it is uniquely diverse.
if you didn't know better, here,
Muslims, well, you have Muslims and Hindus, and you have a lot of Chinese
yeah,
descent. Yeah. Oh, and you have Bethlehem, so you have African American churches.
But
Yeah.
if you didn't know better, you would assume that that culture is kind of evenly distributed somehow across the region. Like, oh, well, the next city over must be pretty similar, and it must be similar. No, Live Oak is almost entirely Hispanic, and Yuba City is almost entirely Sikh culture um, impacted. And so it's really not a gradient. It's just this one spot is very different, and that is the spot that was chosen for the temple.
You know, there's a lot of what can you call the chickens in Yuba City? Um, like runaway chickens or something. There's so many chickens
Feral, street
in the
chickens.
feral. There you go, feral chickens in the commercial areas of Yuba City. And when the temple was announced, Josh went and bought this beautiful ceramic chicken and mailed it to the temple department and said, "There have to be chickens. There have to be chickens somewhere. It's a Yuba City icon." And there are a couple of paintings in the temple that do have chickens. Beautiful paintings. I don't know if that's why they included them, but
It has to be.
homage to the Yuba City chickens.
Yeah, there's no way that was picked for any other reason than it had chickens in it. It's in the celestial room. It's not like it's tucked away
Yeah,
back of the
yeah,
dressing room. It's in the celestial room. So
true.
it's not like they're, haphazardly like, oh, whatever, paintings in the celestial room, nobody will see them. No, it's
Uh,
all right. So where do you think we pick up after this?